You already know what you did. You sat there. The deadline was real. The consequences were real. And you watched yourself open your phone anyway, not impulsively, almost deliberately. Like some part of you made a choice your conscious mind didn't authorize. And then came the part that's worse than the procrastination itself. The clarity. That horrible lucid awareness that you did it to yourself. Again, that you saw it happening and couldn't stop it. That you were both the saboteur and the witness, trapped in the same body, watching. That feeling, that specific, nauseating combination of guilt and confusion and something that sits just below shame, has been following you for years. Nobody has ever given you a name for it that didn't also quietly accuse you. Today that changes. Here is what you have been told about yourself. That you're lazy, that you lack discipline, that you are in some fundamental and possibly unfixable way your own worst enemy. You heard it from someone else first. Then you started whispering it to yourself at 2 a.m. when the shame was loudest and the evidence felt overwhelming. And somewhere along the way, you stopped questioning whether it was true and started building your identity around it. The person who always gets in their own way? The one who knows better and still doesn't do better? The one who keeps proving the accusation right? I need you to understand something before we go any further. That story is not a diagnosis. It is not evidence. It is not even close to accurate. It is a shame narrative dressed up as self-awareness. And it has been costing you far more than any deadline you've ever missed. Studies show that somewhere between 62 and 82% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. In university settings, up to 95% of students report chronic procrastination. These are not the statistics of a broken minority. This is almost everyone. Which means the story that made this your private failure, your personal character defect, was never based on data. It was based on the fact that shame is loudest when it's most alone. And you've been alone with this for a long time. So what is actually happening? Your brain is not, at its core, a pleasure-seeking machine. That's the version of neuroscience that gets quoted in productivity articles. The more honest version is colder and more interesting. Your brain is a prediction machine. Its primary function, the thing evolution optimized it for, above everything else, including your happiness, including your success, including your relationships, is to model what is coming next so it can keep you alive. Every waking second, it is running simulations, building internal maps of reality, making predictions. And when reality matches the map, everything is calm. When reality diverges from the map, when a gap opens between what your brain expected and what actually happened, the alarm sounds. Neuroscientists call this a prediction error. Your primitive brain calls it danger. Now here's the part that will reframe everything. Your brain doesn't just build maps of the physical world. It builds a map of you. It holds an internal model of your identity, your competence, your worth. It draws a line, call it your baseline, and it says, this is how capable I expect this person to be. This is how much safety I expect this life to contain. And your brain will do almost anything, including destroy your most important opportunities to keep reality from moving too far away from that line. Not because it wants you to fail, because it is terrified of being wrong about who you are. This is the hidden code running underneath all of it. The procrastination, the imposter syndrome, self-sabotage that felt random and irrational and deeply personal, but was actually, in the most precise neurological sense, a protection strategy. Your brain wasn't betraying you. It was defending you, badly, destructively, with devastating consequences, but defending you nonetheless. Here's how it works in two directions. Some people carry a very high baseline. Internal map says, I am, or I should be, highly competent, impressive, not the kind of person who fails publicly. And then reality approaches with its messy, uncertain data. An exam, a performance review, a creative project that might reveal the gap between who they believe they should be and who they actually are in this unfinished moment. The prediction error opens. Brain sees incoming data it doesn't want to receive. So it does something breathtaking in its cleverness and its self-destruction. It makes sure the data never gets collected. You stay up until 3 a.m. doing anything but the work. You start the project the night before. You go into the presentation underprepared. Not because you want to fail. Because if you fail with a handicap in place, the baseline survives. The story stays intact. You failed because you were exhausted, not because you aren't who you believed yourself to be. And if somehow you succeed despite the handicap, the baseline doesn't just survive, it inflates. You did it half asleep. Imagine what you're capable of at full power. The trap is elegant. Cost is your entire potential. Other people carry a very low baseline. The internal map says, I'm not good enough. I'm a fraud. People will figure that out eventually, and when they do, everything falls apart. And then something extraordinary happens. A promotion arrives. Someone tells them their work is brilliant. The world delivers undeniable evidence of their value, and the prediction error runs the other way. Reality is suddenly far better than expected. The line shoots upward, and to a brain that predicted worthlessness, a sudden abundance of evidence to the contrary doesn't feel like good news. It feels like the stakes just got real. Because if you're actually capable, if the evidence of your value is real, then you now have something significant to lose. You can no longer fail quietly. The exposure risk just multiplied. So you begin, quietly and often unconsciously, to telegraph your limitations before anyone discovers them on their own. You tell people you haven't been sleeping, mention how overwhelmed you are before the project even begins. You underpromise in ways that feel like honesty, but function like armor. Slowly, invisibly, you train everyone around you to expect less. You trade a future you could have had for a moment of familiar safety. You retreat into the predictable pain of not being enough, because your brain has made a calculation you were never consulted on. A predictable failure is survivable. An uncertain success is not. You are not failing at discipline. You are succeeding at self-protection. Those are not the same thing. The moment you understand that, really understand it, in your body, not just your head, you stop asking, why am I like this? And start asking something far more useful. What does my brain actually need from me right now? Here's what it needs. Evidence. Real, external, carefully gathered evidence that the world is safer than it currently believes. But before you can gather evidence, you have to get your rational mind back in the room. And that requires one thing first. When the wave of anxiety hits, when the urge to escape appears, don't fight it and don't follow it. Name it, open a notebook. Write down exactly what you're experiencing in this moment, not what you think you should be feeling, what you actually feel. The tightness across your chest. The thought that sounds like you're going to be exposed. The heat in your face that screams run. This technique is called cognitive diffusion, and its effect is immediate. When fear lives only inside your head, you are the fear. The moment you put it on paper, you step outside it. You become the observer rather than the observed. Panic is still in the room, but it is no longer driving. That distance, that tiny deliberate gap between you and the emotion, is where your judgment re-enters. And that is all you need to begin. From there, the tools can vary. If you are the perfectionist who freezes before starting because nothing you make will be good enough, try this. Write at the top of your page that your only goal for the next 20 minutes is to produce the worst, most embarrassing, most incompetent version of this that you possibly can. Make failure the objective. The moment you do that, your amygdala quiets because you cannot fail at making something bad. The alarm stops ringing. You start moving. And once you have momentum, the standard quietly corrects itself. But by then, the paralysis is already broken. If you are the procrastinator whose sabotage arrives on schedule, the couch, the phone, the sudden exhaustion that appears precisely when it's time to begin, you need to write a script for the moment before the hijack happens. Identify the exact trigger. It's the walk through the door. The first 5 minutes after lunch? Then write an if-then plan so specific it leaves no room for in-a-moment negotiation. If I sit down on the couch, I will immediately put my phone face down in the kitchen. Not a goal, a behavioral script. You are preloading the decision so your brain doesn't have to make it under pressure. And if what you feel is the raw physical pull of an impulse, that almost electrical charge that says, escape right now, don't fight it and don't obey it. Track it. Write down the intensity. Wait 2 minutes. Write it again. These physiological urges behave exactly like waves. They build, they peak, and they always collapse, typically within 20 minutes. Every time you ride one without acting on it, you are strengthening the very neural circuitry that makes self-regulation possible. You are not white-knuckling your way through, you're training. But all of that is real-time management. What actually rewires the baseline, what produces lasting change rather than daily maintenance. It's what you do with the data the real world hands you. Run experiments. Take the belief your brain has quietly accepted as established fact. I'm incompetent. My work isn't ready. I'll be exposed, and treat it like a hypothesis that hasn't been properly tested. Share something unfinished with someone you trust. Not polished, not perfected, just honest. But then pay attention to what actually happens, not what you predicted. What happens? Your brain has been running its internal model on corrupted, outdated information for years. The only way to recalibrate is to introduce accurate external data and then refuse to let your brain explain it away. And when something goes wrong, when the experiment doesn't land, when you fall back into the old pattern, when you miss the deadline again, the most consequential thing you can change is how you categorize that moment. A mistake is not evidence of your fundamental inadequacy. It is data. It tells you something specific and useful about what to adjust. The moment you treat failure as information rather than verdict, your brain stops registering it as existential threat. And when there is no threat, the alarm doesn't sound. When the alarm doesn't sound, the sabotage has no signal to run on. The cycle doesn't end through force. It ends through calibration. Here's what I want to leave you with. The people who struggle most with self-sabotage are almost never the people with the least capability. They are almost always the people with the most at stake, the deepest self-awareness, and the most complex relationship with their own potential. The pattern was never proof that you were broken. It was proof that your brain cared so much about protecting you that it deployed extraordinary, misdirected measures to do it. That is not a weakness to be ashamed of. That is a capacity to be redirected. You don't need to become a different person. You need to understand the person you already are, well enough to stop declaring war on them. The world does not need more people who never doubt themselves. It needs more people who can move through doubt without being paralyzed by it. That skill, sitting with uncertainty, staying in motion when the outcome is unclear, trusting a process you can't fully predict, is not something you're building from scratch. It's something you've been practicing your whole life, under the worst possible conditions, without a map, without credit. You were never lazy. You were never the problem. You were always the person who cared too much to fail, and your brain just never learned a better way to protect that. Now you have one. If this gave language to something you've been carrying quietly, share it. Someone in your life is holding the same weight and calling it by the wrong name. They need to hear this more than you did. If this helped you understand yourself instead of attacking yourself, subscribe. We're not here to fight who you are. We're here to understand it and build from there.